Bienvenidos, welcome to the HMBCC Council meeting, January 16th, 2024. May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Brownstone?
Here.
Councilmember Reddick?
Here.
Councilmember Penrose?
Here.
Vice Mayor Verbeck?
Here.
Mayor Jimenez?
Here.
You have a quorum.
May we stand for the pledge, please? Thank you. May I have approval for the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now we go to our proclamations and our presentations. Today we're going to be recognizing our nonprofits, about the tragedy that happened last year, January 23rd. It has not been easy, for the community since our tragedy of the 7 farm workers that were shot and killed in Half Moon Bay, and how it affected our community. Thank you to all of you, the organizations and individuals that step forward, to provide the support to our local community. When we think about the shooting, it's something that we don't think could ever happen in our community, but it did. It is just shows our character of the community of Half Moon Bay, of how all of you and many more came forward to support, the community in need. And this was right after the floods. So it speaks a lot about our character of the community. Thank you. Today, I would like to recognize all the organizations and individuals that for the last year have been providing the support, and the support that is going to continue as our farm workers continue to need our support. I would like to present certificates of recognition to all of you with gratitude. I have a list, a long list, and that's what I love about it. Let me find my list. Have it. Please, when I call your name or your name of the organization, step up to the podium and see Julissa. After you receive the certificate, please go to the wall where you're going to gather everybody. After everybody's called. Alas, ayudando latinos a soñar. Because I hope. El Centro.
I believe they're absent today, but we'll deliver their certificate.
Thank you. Cabrillo Unified School District. Okay, please step down. Self-help for the elderly.
They're also absent today.
Body services. Airbnb.
They're also not here, just for reference, they're located in the East Coast, and they provided a lot of service, so we'll make sure they get the certificate.
Thank you. Abundant Grace. Mavericks Community Foundation. San Mateo Credit Union. Chinese for Affirmative Action.
They're also not here.
Rotary Club. Chamber of Commerce. Puente de la Costa Sur. Rabbi Moshe.
He's also not here.
Community United Methodist Church. Coastside Lutheran Church. Table of Plenty.
Sister Jeanette,
She was here.
she was here. Sister Jeanette.
All right. Mariners Church.
They're also not here.
DA's Victims Unit.
Not here either.
Dr. Rona who? Wei Ting Chen.
She couldn't make it either. We'll give it to you.
San Mateo County Coroner's Investigation Team.
Not here.
Senior Co-Siders. Boys and Girls Club. Red Cross.
They're not here.
Dr. Joan Beng. Grace Jean. Also, our landlords that have provided housing for our farm workers. James Wilkinson,
None of them could be here tonight,
Well,
so you can read the names, but none of them are here.
Stanley Judkins, Ralph Ellie, Catherine Coluca, David Crescent, Rodney Donovan, Cindy Billy Tyler Parker. And that's a long list. Like I said, that's a recognition of our community, our character of our community, who we are. Then at time of need, we step forward and provide support to those in need. Thank you. Now we have a presentation from HIP Housing.
Hello, good evening. Have my colleague come up here, my artiste. Here, one moment, please. All right, hi, my name is Anita Fox, and I'm a board member of HIP Housing. I'm here today to share something fun with Matthias. Since 1972, HIP Housing has been helping low-income San Mateo County residents to find and maintain housing in one of the most expensive places to live in the country. HIP Housing is listed in all 21 housing elements in San Mateo County, including yours, as a trusted affordable housing partner. Last year, we worked with over 3,200 individuals and housed 1,200 people throughout this county. In Half Moon Bay alone, we received 49 inquiry calls this year, and currently, that was 2023, and currently work with a total of 51 people here, helping to house 12 individuals through our home sharing program and 2 people through our self-sufficiency program. On behalf of HIP Housing, I'd like to thank the Honorable Mayor Jimenez and the members of the Half Moon Bay City Council for your enduring support of our organization. As a symbol for our appreciation and partnership, I'm here to present you with HIP Housing's calendar for the year. This is the fun part. Each year, HIP Housing asks children from throughout the county in grades kindergarten through 5th grade to draw a picture of home and tell us what it means to them. This year, we had over 300 calendar entries, and from those entries, we selected 13. 12 of them for the months, and then the cover. So I'm privileged and honored today to introduce you to Matthias. What's your first name? Matthias, okay. And he's in the 1st grade in Half Moon Bay, and he's in the August, right? In August? So he's going to read to you what he wrote and what home means to him in the calendar. Do you remember it? Let's see, where's June, July, August? You want to read that?
My home is a place where my family can get together, where I can feel real love, stay safe, and be myself.
So we hope you enjoy the calendar, and it serves as a beautiful reminder throughout the year of how important housing is to everyone in our county, especially our children. More information about HIP Housing's program, the calendar contest, is all available online at hiphousing.org. So thank you. We have these for you.
Thank you.
For the lady right there in the ponytail. Thank you. Actually, one more thing. Can we come up here and take a picture really quick with the...
Yes, of course. Yes. Thank you, Matthias. Now we have a proclamation honoring Clay Lambert. Clay, please. Clay, thank you. I personally want to thank you. You and I go back several years, and we usually agreed most of the things. And I want to say, one of the conversations that we had during 2020, the pandemic, my election, some of the things that you said to me when we met always keep them with me, always in my, in my mind with me. So I want to thank you. Clay Lambert, the City of Half Moon Bay, the City Council, here congratulates Clay Lambert on his career with the Half Moon Bay Review and greatly appreciate his contribution to the Half Moon Bay community and the journalism through his work. Clay has ensured that the co-sider story gets told. The city council is grateful for these many years of service and offer him the best wishes and happiness for many more years to come. Thank you, Clay.
I would like to say thank you to you, Clay. You chose a career that is fraught with difficulty. You can't please everybody in a career like that. There are always going to be people that say, oh, I don't like what Clay said, or yes, I'm for what Clay said. But what always came through for me was your love of Half Moon Bay and your respect for those people that did disagree with you. So thank you, and good luck in your next venture.
Local journalism is so important, and we're really, really grateful for everything you've done the last 20 years. So good luck in your future, and thank you for what you have done. Thank you.
Clay, I've been, I feel the city's been blessed with the review, with you as an editor. And one of the reasons, people asked me a lot when I first was running, what are some of the factors that made you decide to run for office? And I said, well, one of them was I felt it was a progressive council that got a lot of things done, and I liked who I'd be working with. And I said, we also happen to have a very fair and honorable press here. And I didn't take that for granted. I never expected press to agree with all of us or any one of us at any given moment. But I felt that the honesty and fairness that I sensed in your editorials and how the news was handled made me feel, this is a good environment to run for office and serve. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
We move to the Mid-Coast Community Council update.
Rothman, and I'm the secretary, and thank you for having me this evening. We can update you first with the fact that we have new officers, starting with Gus Matamal, he's our chair. Greg Diegas is the vice chair. Scott Bollinger is the treasurer, and I am Ann Rothman, and I'm the secretary. Priorities as we start the new year include stormwater issues on the Mid-Coast, adoption of dark sky international standards of lighting into an ordinance, we hope. We will discuss support for the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative for the Coast at our next meeting. The Coastal Commission will be conducting a hearing deciding whether to permit the Middle Mile broadband down the coast between February 7th and 9th. We will be providing comments regarding the remodel of the El Granada and Farallon View schools. Community members were very concerned most about lighting. We will also be providing comments regarding the proposed Fire Station 44 in Moss Beach rebuild. Concerns about hazards near neighbors and lighting were discussed as this station is located inside of a residential neighborhood. Finally, we would like to see the Samtrans program that provided transportation from Half Moon Bay to Princeton go all the way up to Montera and include the entire mid-coast. We are starting the new year off with a busy calendar, and we thank you for including us this evening.
Any questions, comments? Thank you. Now we move on to mayor's announcements. It is me. I'm the mayor. I was thinking. There's so many things to say, but actually, I don't know if you read on the paper or heard about a $2 million check that we received from Senator Becker. So that's it's just going to be directed towards our farm worker housing. This coming week, on the 21st, you are all invited to the ceremony, the members of our farm workers from the shooting of the last year, January 23rd. You're all invited. Also, on the 25th, we're also going to be receiving a check from Assembly Member Berman, also going to be directed towards farm worker housing, for funds for farm worker housing. And that's my announcements. Do you have anything to report from the closed session?
Thank you, Mayor. The council did meet in closed session earlier this evening to discuss 2 liability claims. Nothing to report out.
Thank you, Catherine. City managers updates.
Given the large agenda tonight, we don't have any updates for you. Thank you. Oh, we do? You'd think someone would tell the city manager he had an update. Matt, go for it.
Good evening, City Council, public. Thank you all for being here this evening. My name is Matt Nichols. I'm the Public Works and Sustainability Management Analyst. And tonight I'll be doing a quick city manager update on the city's adaptation plan. So a few years back, the city of Half Moon Bay embarked on its climate action and adaptation plan. And we recently completed that first part of that, which was the action plan. That action plan consisted of inventorying our greenhouse gases, looking at steps the city can take to be a leader in this space in reducing our greenhouse gases, being more efficient. And now we're about to embark on the second part of that journey, which is our adaptation plan, looking at things like extreme weather events, climate change, sea level rise, erosion, and how those things can affect our wonderful city and how we can better prepare for those events when they happen. Some of the things we're looking at are winter storms, drought, sea level rise, wildfire, increased heat, as well as infrastructure like our communications and power infrastructure that could be at risk from those events. Talking a little bit more about adaptation and action plans. So that action plan is the mitigation part of this chart here, where we're looking at how we can use transportation in more environmentally friendly ways, such as walking, biking, taking mass transit, doing things like making upgrades to our buildings so that they're more energy efficient, they keep the heat in or they keep the cold out, using LED light bulbs, things like that. Localized food production and consumption using reusable foodware and things like that to cut down on our waste from going into landfills and emitting those greenhouse gases. And then there's some overlap too, because as we do these things, we do make ourselves more resilient to that climate adaptation. When we have these renewable systems that have the benefit of being able to pull energy from their own system, that does make us more adaptive. And so for the second part of this plan, we're going to be looking at infrastructure, the different communities that make up our city of Half Moon Bay, nature and the idea of rewilding, which is kind of allowing nature to take its course and take care and heal itself, as well as looking at the capacity of our systems and how they're able to respond. We started this second phase of our climate action and adaptation plan back in late fall. And now with winter here, we're rolling into the outreach part of that. So you may have seen us outside downtown McTeacher this morning or in the lobby this evening. We'll be at the library tomorrow from 11:30 to 1:30. So please come on by. We'd love to talk to you, get your input on what things that you think really are important for Half Moon Bay in terms of what we want to protect and save and what could be at risk. As time goes on, there'll be many more opportunities to get public input on this project, and we'd love to get as much feedback as we can. We really want this to be a project made with the input of our community so that it serves our community. Going a little bit more into this current round of engagement, we're working with our education partners. We're working to educate our community on the impacts of climate change, to help people understand the needs and challenges, and also to help us understand the needs and challenges, because it's quite easy for us to look at a map and say, oh, there's a power station, oh, there's telephone lines, but there's other things in this community that make Half Moon Bay such a special place, and we want to hear from you to know what those things are so that we can help protect those. So some of the engagement that we've been doing is we'll be having some listening sessions in February. We've been doing the pop-up open houses, so that's what we had in the park today as well as in the lobby and at the library tomorrow from 11:30 to 1:30. We've been working with our schools to do a scavenger hunt activity at some locations around town, looking at places like the Johnston House and Poplar Beach and our beautiful library. And as those areas kind of represent the greater parts of Half Moon Bay, with the Johnston House representing our beautiful agricultural community, the library kind of representing our homes and neighborhoods, and Poplar Beach for our beautiful beaches, of course, as well as some other activities we've been doing with students there with handouts and quizzes and curriculum. If you'd like to learn more information about the city's climate adaptation plan as we get started, you can go to hmbcity.com/adaptation, and we'd really love it if you were to take our survey. We have a public survey happening right now. It's going to go on till early February. The link for that is on the city's adaptation website, and we'll also be showing that link in things like e-news, as well as our social media on Nextdoor, Facebook, and Instagram. So thank you again for your time. If you have any questions, I'd love to help you out, answer any of those.
Thank you. Any questions? No. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Do we have any more city manager updates, folks? No? All right.
Thank you. We now move on to our public forum. We have Crystalline.
Crystalline from the Coastside Chamber of Commerce. I would just like to reiterate on mic what Eric from Abundant Grace was saying off mic, which is there was a certificate. There was actually 43 certificates missing from that list, which was to city staff. Nothing that us nonprofits did or before, during, or after could have been done without the help of the city. And city staff definitely went so far above and beyond for that situation and for the weather events that we had before that. I know everybody in this room that works for the city worked at least 100 hours a day, and you guys did an amazing job. So if everybody could give staff a hand of applause for what they did. And if you're on the Zoom and you did not applaud, go to bed. And then the real reason I also came up was State of the Coastside is coming. So that is going to be 10 local agencies giving 10-minute updates on what did they do in 2023 and what do they plan to do on 2024. And the public is invited January 25th, 12 noon, Mezzaluna Restaurant. You can sign up on our website, coastside365.com, right on the homepage, and we will have snacks.
Mezzaluna snacks, so they're good. And we look forward to having everybody learn about the Coastside Year Ahead in one room at one time, which is so cool. And thank you so much to the city for being an important part of that event. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystalline. Now we have Georgina Mora. Georgina? No. Carolina Carvajal.
Test.
Muy buenas noches a todos.
Good evening, all.
Como todos ya sabemos, un nuevo año, un nuevo comienzo.
Like we all know, it's a new year, a new start.
Lastimosamente, para estas fechas, nuestro pueblo comenzó a atravesar malos momentos.
Unfortunately, in the beginning of this year, our town has gone through some difficult, bad moments.
Pero seguimos aquí de pie
But here we are, standing,
y es tiempo de reflexionar.
and it's time to really kind of reflect on things.
A un año del tiroteo, muchas personas, incluso periodistas, se preguntan cómo se sigue viviendo en Half Moon Bay.
After the shooting, including some journalists, ask themselves, how could one continue to live in Half Moon Bay?
Lastimosamente, ese suceso marcó a nuestra ciudad.
And unfortunately, that left a mark in our city.
Pero se sigue viviendo en mucha dificultad en Half Moon Bay.
There's still a lot of difficulty with living here in Half Moon Bay.
Yo sé que si ustedes le preguntan a las personas que sobrevivieron a eso,
I know that if you were to ask people that survived that,
hasta para ellos sigue siendo muy dificultosos la vivienda.
and even for them, housing continues to be very difficult.
Como personas que necesitamos más viviendas en Half Moon Bay,
So as people that continue to need housing here in Half Moon Bay,
no necesitamos reconocimientos
we don't need to be recognized
ni monumentos
or any monuments
o que celebren fiestas por la situación.
or to have any kind of party or ceremony because of the situation.
Lo que las personas necesitan es acción.
So what people do need is for us to take action.
Ver que sí les están tomando importancia a lo que pasó.
That, yeah, to see that it is important for you to see that things are going on or what's going on.
Siempre les he dicho, nosotros no queremos que nos regalen casas.
I've always told you all that we don't want free houses or handout houses
O ser una carga pública para el Estado.
or to be a burden for the city or the state.
Creo que como trabajadores esenciales
I think as essential workers
o trabajadores agrícolas,
or farm workers,
lo único que queremos es un lugar que podamos pagar con nuestro esfuerzo.
the only thing we want is something that with our effort can afford.
Algo que pueda ser adaptado a nuestras familias, a nuestras necesidades.
Something that we can take on for our families, for our needs.
No necesitamos lujos,
No luxury things,
ni que las personas hagan lástima diciendo pobrecitos.
or for people to have pity on us saying, poor people.
Queremos hacerlo con nuestro esfuerzo,
We want to put our effort into it. We wanna
cosas que
work for it.
podamos pagar nosotros,
Things that we can pay for.
porque a futuro tampoco queremos que nadie diga, ellos tienen eso porque nosotros se los regalamos.
Because in the future, we don't want people saying oh, those people have that because of our efforts.
Sabemos que no es nuestro país,
We know it's not our country,
pero créanme,
but believe me,
hay muchas personas que dejaron toda su vida en este país,
there's a lot of people that have laid it all out for this country,
que han hecho mucho de este país.
that have actually made this country great.
Y no se les regresará nada. No se les regresará nada.
And they haven't received anything in return.
Pero eso tampoco los hace sentir menos.
But because of that, we don't feel any less than.
Sabemos que somos su mano de obra.
So we know we're laborers.
Así que solo les pedimos que sigan luchando por darnos un lugar donde poder vivir.
So we just keep asking you to keep fighting to give us a place where we can live.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Carolina. Thank you.
I have no more public speakers, Mayor.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved. I move that we adopt the consent calendar. Was that it? We don't need to go any further?
I think you got to list them.
Yeah.
That's your job.
I'm just trying to keep everybody informed of what we're approving here. Well, we're going to approve items 1A, waive reading of resolutions and ordinances. Item 1B, purchase of a new John Deere tractor. Item 1C, stormwater national pollutant discharge elimination systems and annual reporting services for 2024. Item 1D, funding to support continued emergency housing for displaced farm workers. And item 1E, Stone Pine Cove CEQA document preparation.
Second.
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Now we move to our ordinance and our public hearings.
Mr. Mayor, we've got Mike Noche with us tonight, and I believe John Dowdy, our Assistant City Manager, will also be joining him to present on the first phase of our work to enhance tenant protections here, which is a rental registration ordinance. I see John coming now.
Evening, Council and community, Mayor, Vice Mayor. Pleased to be here, John Dowdy with the City Manager's Office, and as Matthew indicated, Mike Noche here to help with this presentation. And what we're here to talk about is some follow-up from prior direction given by City Council, and this is part of the overall tenant protections package that the council directed on November 7th that staff proceed with. Tonight, we call this the residential rental registration and related items. The primary effort and issue tonight is the residential rental registration ordinance, but there are bits and pieces that we'll talk about a little bit as well, which are some cleanup and just organizational-wise important pieces. So you can read this, but this will be a pretty brief presentation. We won't belabor too much conversation, but we'll go over hit the high points, and then certainly offer the opportunity for you in the community to ask questions should there be more specifics with regard to any and all of the ordinance work that's in front of you. Just to reiterate for folks in the audience and in whatever form they're taking, the actions being taken tonight only apply to properties within the city limits. So El Granada area, the Moon Ridge area are in unincorporated San Mateo County and are not subject to this. So this is purely, seems straightforward, but there always seems to be questions, so we just want to be clear about that. City Council has asked that we begin preparation of multiple potential ordinances for introduction and consideration down the road. And as a result of this, staff is recommending that we take one of the reserved titles, and that would be Title VI, to create a housing title. So everything generally policy and ordinance related would be consolidated into that location, make it easier for the public to find, make it easier for staff to find, make it easier for anyone to find the information materials. We are not going to pull and parse out zoning related information. That's in the local coastal implementation plan. We can't do that, but anything and everything related to general housing policies, such as the rent control, such as this rental registration and such. So that's the first action that we're here to talk about. The next piece of this would be to consolidate housing definitions into a single place for housing-related ordinances. So this pulls definitions from what is now currently Chapter 7.70 and also takes in the definitions that are coming from the rental registration ordinance. And ultimately, with this new title, all the housing definitions, should we come forward with rent control, when we come forward with rent control and other ordinances, those definitions would also be consolidated into a single place. So when you are trying to define landlord, for example, or a tenant or an owner, there is one singular place to find that, and there's not multiple definitions of the same term. And again, this would include future definition changes and added as we add additional ordinances. The brunt of, as I said, of this work is really focused on a new Chapter 6.04, which would add to the municipal code a new residential rental registration process. And what that, in a nutshell, requires is that each housing unit in the city be registered annually. There are multiple purposes behind this, but as we indicated in the staff report, this is something foundational to any future work related to rent control, enhanced tenant protections. But on top of that, the information that's gleaned from this registration process can be used by the Planning Commission as they look at future housing element work. It will help provide a lot of information regarding your market that we struggled with putting together for the November 7th meeting, trying to get information because we're such a small market area and small marketplace that we don't have great information regarding what rents folks are paying, what types of units, what size of those units, number of bedrooms, all the things that are commonplace information that we'd like to gather. So yes, it's foundational to that process, but on top of that, there is a lot of good data and information we think will come from this. And ultimately, the question sometimes comes as to why are you just going to do this? Why don't you do this just for those that might be subject to rent control? First and foremost, we're still trying to define and identify what units will be subject to rent control under Costa-Hawkins. But I think the last piece of this is as important as any. We have very little way sometimes, particularly under what the information that we have, to link tenants and landlords of all types of rental situations to resources. And those resources include mediation processes and things of that nature, information on what A lease should include what it may not be asking for, all the different things that come around. And this is important, we think, for both sides of the equation, the tenant and the landlord piece of this. So that's why this is a more encompassing and all-encompassing in terms of all the residential units that would be included in this. And then we're also looking to add a new chapter 6.10. And what this does is pull chapter 770, which was approved in 2019, just heading into the mess of COVID and following up the Tenant Protection Act that the state put forth. And at that time, I think the decision made sense. What that ordinance did was, in essence, require certain units, certain landlords of certain units require to offer a 12-month lease, but there were a lot of units in the city that were excluded, and there was a process and a conversation that occurred within the community that led to that decision ultimately and adoption of the ordinance. When Mike and I really looked at this and looked at it in the context of 2024, looked at it in the context of what the city council's objectives and have been clearly stated for the record, we landed on the fact that this probably needs to be revisited, and frankly that the 12-month lease option be provided to every rental in the city, not limited to certain units that were excluded because of what was written into the Tenant Protection Act that was not necessarily required. The ordinance again brings 770 over and renames it, renumbers it, and but it also includes retention of the dispute resolution processes and the other prohibitions on retaliatory evictions. And it is possible that this chapter will be integrated into subsequent ordinance work, or it may still maintain as a standalone. Mike and staff and everybody, we need to look through that and work through that. So our vision of this is that it may be added onto, or it may become consolidated. But in any event, this would preserve those protections at this point, would expand the protections by offering 12-month lease options to virtually every tenant in the city. And again, would continue dispute resolution processes and other protections. So from an implementation perspective, I know the council and community are anxious to figure out, what all of this means, the tenants and landlords. So on, if you introduce tonight, that's the recommendation is to introduce this ordinance on February 6th. We will return to City Council to discuss the establishment of a fee for the registration program. We're working on costing out the program and then trying to also determine what we believe is a reasonable number of units that would be affected and applicable to this, and then bringing back a fee resolution as required by state law. We will, in the process, be working with a consultant to create the online registration portal, online payment system, and a secure database. So the information that we ask for and receive will be secure and maintained. The database will provide us the ability to dig into the data and while not showing and providing information that would create a problem for the tenant as a privacy issue, or open up the landlords to private information as well in terms of for a competitive disadvantage. We want to be able to manipulate, deal with that, and to formulate some recommendations down the road with regard to that. So that the database is important to be, one, secure, but two, be able to be manipulated and modified and searched and sorted to get to different things. And then ultimately, we will need to be developing a full mailing list for known rental units and frankly identifying unknown rental units at this time. So that would be a whole host of work, including mailers, information materials, how-to for the landlords, outreach to tenants and NGOs regarding this effort. Again, part of this is going to be people letting us know where they're renting, what's happening out there. So it's a two pieces to this equation, with the ultimate intention of commencing full registration on July 1, 2024. Our vision is to open the registration portal by June 1 and allow for at least a 2-month period for registrations to occur and move forward. I know that each of you are probably then asking, well, what's next? So I'll give you, here's my best prediction of the next steps at this point based on the work that we're doing, continuing to do, and working through. In April, we are hoping and planning to present a draft rent control ordinance to the City Council. We are looking at this as probably being more of a work session, study session, because there are some policy decisions that are going to have to be made within that ordinance, and I don't think that we can just do an introduction and deal with it, but we can do both a study session, workshop, whatever you wish to call it, in April, and I think still either introduce in late April or May that ordinance if all things work perfectly. May, we would be looking to present the draft relocation assistance and other enhanced protections. And the idea of this is that they are kind of hand in glove to some extent. One of the concerns we have is that when you implement rent control ordinance without having the protections in place against retaliatory or just basically bumping folks out of the homes because they don't like the rent control, these need to go hand in glove, but we think that these are pretty weighty items. The idea would be then in June to introduce and adopt probably both of these ordinance ultimately, and maybe that would be second readings on each one of them probably in June. So they would be running at the same time, an effective date within 30 days of adoption. And then we would also look at bringing in June the fees, and that would for what that rent control program, and at this point we have to work through a lot of iterations to figure out what those will be, but that's the scenario. And then we were looking at fall of 2024 to implement the whole rent control process. Optimally, we'd like to call that October 1 of 2024 and that would allow us between June, July into October, the time to get notices out, to pull together all the materials, working documents, all the things that are needed to basically establish the program and to manage that. And in the meantime, we would be collecting the information and the data and sorting the data from the registration to help inform the listing and the tenants and the landlords and everything with that. So that's why all of this sort of layers together ultimately into a neat package. So at this time, we're open certainly for clarifying questions from the council. And again, before I just say the recommendation, if you see fit to, would be to introduce this ordinance, which includes 5, in essence, separate actions. Thank you.
Any clarifying questions? No. Move on to our public forum, public comments. Bill Hibling.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone, and congratulations, Mayor Jimenez. My name is Bill Hevlin, and I'm one of the principal lay leaders of UUCC, the Unitarian Universalist Coast-Side Community, centered here in Half Moon Bay. The city has engaged seriously with the issue of affordable housing for low-income and very low-income residents I speak today here to encourage these efforts. And for today's agenda item connected to tenant protections, which are important. In particular, I want to call your attention to the 2023 U.S. Surgeon General's report entitled Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. The Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, devotes one of his 4 chapters to the importance of socially connected communities and socially bridged communities. These are his terms. The latter refers to mixing communities economically, ethnically, and linguistically, intergenerationally, and so on. And I hope you can see how the residential rental registration project can help understand these dimensions. For Half Moon Bay, the affordable housing proposals that I have seen, these can achieve much of this with just little tweaks, with just a little awareness of the goal of fostering social connection. Such efforts would involve mixed housing stock neighborhoods, well-connected transportation networks, and strategically placed communal green space. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Bill. Now we have Shauna Pickett-Gordon.
To echo what Bill Hevlin said, I'm with Faith in Action on the coast side, and I want to thank you for your continuing and escalating even efforts to bring housing justice to the coast side. It is a long, long path consisting of many carefully thought out steps, and I'm seeing wonderful work. I've printed and read your proposed ordinance and all the backup material, and it's really very, very carefully thought out. My concern is that we keep in the forefront of our minds as we do this work that is quantifiable and can be done step by step. If we keep in mind the fact that we have tremendous income disparities here on the coast side. We have so many people, like myself, people of privilege. I'm not a wealthy person, but I have so much privilege by comparison with a lot of the people who make it possible for me to go to New Leaf and buy beautiful produce and get my house cleaned and dozens of other tasks. A lot of us continue to see others' lives through our own filters. And in my ideal world, we would hear more stories from each other about how folks live, about the realities. So I hope that the voices of those who are affected can be heard as often as possible in these hearings, and that we can start seeing realities through others' experience, actual experience, rather than our own filters. But go Council, you're doing a fantastic job. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. Joanne Rukowski.
Well, I'm the third member of what was not intended to be a choir, but appears to be. I, too, am a member of the Unitarian Universal Coastside community and a member of Coastside Faith in Action. And I also thank and congratulate you as a city, as an entire city, for your efforts towards housing justice for everybody. It is really, it's soul warming to know that commitment is there. And as I read through the documents and listened to the initial presentation this evening, the one thing that really struck out to me in terms of the registration process, which I think is essential for having data collection in order to assist in decision-making. It's also essential to assist in education. And that piece that struck out at me was the protection from the written lease, and educating people who do not have written leases to the benefits of a written agreement that will stabilize their rent for the terms of that agreement. So I'm really hoping that one of the outcomes of data collection will be a very strong educational program. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Do you have any more comments? Move on to our. Now we close our public hearing. Council?
Yeah, I would like to say thank you to staff for doing such an excellent, thorough, careful, well-thought-out job on this. It seemed a lot simpler to me last fall when I was talking about, let's do rent control. It's not simple. It's very difficult, and I get that. And I get it even better after reading the staff report tonight about how difficult it must have been and how many different things are in the air when you're trying to make a decision about writing an ordinance. It's not simple. So thank you for the work that you've done, and thank you for the calendar, which looks, although I know that looks like a lot of work for you guys over the next couple of months, I think I can't say strongly enough how important it is that we establish an ordinance ASAP. People are suffering every single day, so thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I'm very impressed with how quickly you got this together, John and staff. It's really important. I think if you've been listening to all the problems that a lot of the renters have in the city, you'll see that a lot of it is these subtenancies, these people who don't have a lease, many people sharing a bedroom or a small house. And I think that this registration procedure will actually help get us on board with understanding where we're coming from, so that when we do implement rent control, we'll have the means to know what we're doing and to educate people who don't have written leases right now, to get them to have written leases and to understand their rights. So I applaud the city, and I'm looking forward to what we will come out with the ordinance in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm going to support this tonight solely because I think it's important to have the data. I don't want my vote and the affirmative tonight to be construed that I support rent control, because I think I made it pretty clear when we were discussing the issue of rent control that I was not going there with you. So, but I am going to support this in terms of gathering the data, which will be important for policy going forward, no matter where we end up.
Thank you.
Great work by staff. I agree with everything council members Penrose and Rohrbach have already said. I support rent control and look forward to working with staff on this ordinance. So thank you.
Thank you. We do need data. You know, that's something that we do to make a decision. But even without the data, just listening for more community, you know, we have Carolina and Rocio here every week, and other members of the community commenting about the struggles that we're going through. the evictions, this is nothing new, but, the city, the work that you're doing is going to prevent that from continue to happen. Just today, we have the presentation from HIB Housing. We had a young Matias, who came forward to talk about what it is, his hopes. And just like him, there's other children. And not only children, but also, our elders or seniors, who are actually struggling to make rents. So, I thank you. It's just like I said, and I keep saying, the staff that we have working in our city, we're very grateful the work that you do. We need to get this done. I strongly support this ordinance, and thank you for your work. Do we need a motion?
I move that we create an ordinance of the City of Half Moon Bay creating Title VI housing in the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code, adding Chapter 6.02 housing definitions, adding Chapter 6.04 residential rental registration, requiring registration of all residential rental properties within the City of Half Moon Bay, and amending and recodifying Chapter 7.70 residential rental security measures as new Chapter 6.10 residential lease terms.
Second.
Could I, on the screen, there was a fifth one that we added which is to formally rescind Chapter 770. If you could add that to the motion, that would be wonderful.
Yes, I'd like to amend my motion to include rescinding Chapter 7.70. Is that what you're saying, John? Residential rental security measures in its entirety.
And I'll second that.
Roll call.
Roll
Councilmember
call.
Brownstone.
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick.
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose.
Emphatically yes.
Vice Mayor Burbeck.
Yes.
Mayor Jimenez.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Could we take a 10-minute break?
How about 5?
5 minutes? You don't want 10 minutes? Let's see. Let's take 10 minutes.
Mayor gets to
Welcome back. Can we move on to item 2B, Animal Control Ordinance, first reading?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council and community. Catherine Ingberg, City Attorney. I'll be presenting on this item, and I am joined on the Zoom by Lori Metzel, who is with the county. She's Chief Animal Control Officer with the county and is knowledgeable in all of the technical matters regarding this ordinance. We don't have a PowerPoint presentation for this item. To give you some background, and then I'm going to hand it off to Lori. This is a proposed first reading of an updated animal control ordinance. As background, the city and actually all of the 20 cities in San Mateo County contract with the county for animal control services. As part of this arrangement, the county requests basically uniform ordinances and implementation of animal control. And as such, we basically need to follow the county's model of animal control ordinance. The county has basically undergone a comprehensive update of the animal control ordinance, of their ordinance, and it was adopted by the Board of Supervisors in December, with the second reading in January of basically just a few weeks ago. And so that is now in effect, and the county's asking all of the 20 cities to correspondingly update their ordinances so that they can all go into effect basically around the same time. So this is the reason for the timing. As additional background, the county did not do this work unilaterally, but actually reached out to other cities within the county to collaborate on the modernization of the animal control ordinance. And I'm happy to say that they actually reached out to Half Moon Bay, largely I think because the city has had a number of dog bite incidents that actually resulted in litigation against the city. And so we, the city attorney's office, was very familiar with the implementation of the ordinance, and really some of the most contentious issues are around the definitions of dangerous and vicious animals, and I'll have Lori kind of elaborate on that. But the goal, one of the primary goals of this modernization is really to tighten up those definitions so that if an animal, typically, in a dog bite incident kind of situation, is before an animal control hearing officer, then those definitions are really tight, because if your dog is deemed to be dangerous or vicious, there are severe consequences. Primarily, vicious animals are essentially euthanized. So unless that decision is appealed and their litigation is filed. So it's really important to get it right. And that was one of the main goals of this update. So I actually want to hand it off to Lori so that she can elaborate on anything that I just said. And I appreciate Lori being here. She's also covering Foster City tonight, so I know she's bouncing back and forth, and I really appreciate her assistance on this item. So Lori, off to you.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. For some reason, I can't turn on my camera. I do apologize. My name is Lori Morton-Fizel, and I'm the program manager for animal control and licensing for San Mateo County Health. And it is a pleasure to be here this evening, Mayor and council members, as well as city staff and residents. As mentioned, this was a long process. We took time to really look at different jurisdictions' ordinances compared to ours, as well as the state ordinance. And we did have a lot of stakeholders. 5 cities, or actually 6 cities, were involved, and subject matter experts. And we really looked at the different languages and how we could tighten it up. But we also looked at it from the perspective of the dog owner, the resident, as well as the county keeping everyone safe. So we are now aligned with the state. The state changed the rabies vaccination law from 4 months to 3 months. So we're asking that that be changed. And as mentioned by the attorney, we looked a lot at dangerous and vicious animals. Currently, our threshold for a vicious animal is very low. A dog can make 2 bite marks and be declared vicious. And as mentioned, that is euthanasia unless a hearing is held. And that's where we get into some of the litigation that costs each city money. So what we've asked is to move that threshold in the ordinance. We've moved it to a much higher, that the dog would have to have the victim would have to have muscle tears, broken bones, several lacerations, several sutures to qualify for vicious. Currently, we have about 65 dangerous dogs in the county. And we feel that permitting these dogs under a dangerous animal permit is the correct way to go. People learn, they train the dogs, and there's a very low violation rate. We're at about a 3% violation rate. The other thing we did is for a dangerous dog currently, if you're on a permit, it's for the life of your animal. We've changed it following the state and other jurisdictions to 3 years. So if a resident in Half Moon Bay follows all the rules, follows all of the hearing officer's suggestions, pays the fees, makes sure they're vaccinated, in 3 years they can request to come off the permit. We added in administrative citations, and this is another tool for the Peninsula Humane Society. Currently, they have an infraction, which is like a law enforcement infraction or a misdemeanor that they can issue. With the administrative cites, they can now issue that and take it out of the already clogged traffic courts, and it will be much easier for not only them to enforce, but also for the resident. The resident pays a fine. However, if the resident disagrees with the administrative cite, they can also request a hearing, and we would have it being held by one of our hearing officers. So we feel that the ordinance is up to date. It's current compared to other jurisdictions, and the ask is that every city adopt this ordinance. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop and see if there's any questions on the ordinance that you would like to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, you said something about rabies 3 months instead of, what was all that about?
So our current ordinance says that a puppy or a kitten can be vaccinated against rabies at 4 months of age. The state of California changed their law a year and a half ago to be 3 months. So now if you get a puppy or a kitten, you can vaccinate against rabies at 3 months. And that's actually recommended to protect from rabies in our county.
Is there an upper limit when you're supposed to vaccinate against rabies?
No, you should do it at 3 months of age. There's no upper limit. So after 3 months of the age, you're in violation of not having that vaccine. We are a rabies endemic county, which means we do have rabies in our county. Currently, it is bats. Bats are the highest carrier, and we get 1 to 2 positive bats a year.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're very welcome.
Any more questions? Comments?
At this point, you can open the public hearing. If there are any speakers, that is.
Is there any speakers on the ordinance? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Chris Darborough, live at 147 Cypress Point Road in Half Moon Bay. Been a resident here in Half Moon Bay for about 32 years. In all of those 32 years, we've either had 1 or 2 dogs during that period of time, so we're definitely dog lovers, but we also appreciate the community safety aspect of this and would encourage the City Council to adopt the change in the ordinance. Mostly from our perspective, it is more balanced and not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to a dangerous dog. Gives you a first offense. If you do what you're supposed to do over that 3-year period of time, then you're back to a normal state. So just would encourage the city council to support the adoption of that ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Public hearing is closed.
At this point, you can have discussion or ask to entertain a motion.
Any comments?
I support the ordinance. It seems like a way to get into the 21st century.
I move that we introduce an ordinance amending portions of Chapter 8.04 Animal Control of the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code to update provisions for animal control.
Second.
Do we need a vote?
Councilmember Brownstone?
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick?
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Verbeck?
Yes.
Mayor Jimenez?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Now we move to item 2C. Okay, we have an appeal of the Planning Commission decision to uphold the Community Development Director's decision denying the minor modifications to a coastal development permit, file number PD dash 21-012 for 225 Valdez Avenue. The applicant and appellant Laurie Russell Ellison will be given 10 minutes to speak. I may reserve time for rebuttal. Upon opening the public hearing, each public speaker will be given 3 minutes for the public comment.
Good evening, Mayor Jimenez and Council. I'm Jill Ickes, Community Development Director, and I'm joined tonight by Joe Butcher, the Community Preservation Specialist. Joe worked on this situation with me and is here to help field questions. Next slide. This agenda item involves 2 proposed modifications to plans previously approved with a coastal development permit. The project history is complex and detailed in your staff report and supporting documentation. The project site is 225 Valdez Avenue. The property is in the R1 single-family zoning district and developed with a single-family home. In 2021, a coastal development permit was approved for additions to the single-family home. This graphic is meant to help orient council to the area of focus. The yellow rectangle is the home's original footprint. The 2 blue rectangles include new development consisting of an addition to the west and a new ground floor level deck to the north or rear of the property. The green rectangle is a 2-story addition with the area of focus being the 2nd floor, which is a terrace. Next slide. There have been numerous renditions of project plans for this portion of the addition. This slide summarizes them. Next slide. Provided for context, this is the full east elevation of the home. For the rest of the presentation, we will focus on this portion of the 2nd story located at the back of the house. This is the terrace as originally approved in both the coastal development permit and building permit. It includes a ridge skylight, relatively open wall portions next to the existing rear wall of the house, and a more weather-protected portion to the north. Decorative architectural columns are part of the design. this space is open to air. It is not conditioned living space. This is another version of the design that was approved during the building permit phase. Note the roof opening instead of the ridge skylight. It was also extended by 1.5 feet. This is the rear elevation. It's meant to help with visualizing this space. Note the openings in this area. I'm just going to highlight them in the upper corners. As of August 2022, various design modifications from the original coastal development permit approval were reviewed and documented following a public comment period. That determination was not appealed. We refer to this as the September 2022 approval, which allowed for either the ridge skylights or the roof opening. Following that approval, modifications were proposed to fully enclose a portion of the terrace, which would thereby incorporate it into the interior space of the home. In November 2022, the Planning Commission approved this proposal with the condition that the enclosed portion be reduced, roughly as depicted in these graphics. This decision was appealed by a neighbor. Instead of moving forward to defend the appeal with this version of the project, the homeowner decided to withdraw their application for these modifications and revert to the September 2022 approval. The project involved code enforcement, and thus at that time, in that the design was considered to be settled, staff worked out a schedule for project completion. The schedule accommodated the rainy season and was reviewed with the owner before it was finalized. Over the next months, progress was made toward project completion. This brings us into the current phase of the project review. In August 2023, the homeowner sought additional modifications. Those modifications include the roof opening and wall openings. For reference, this is the approved version of those features. The proposed modifications include a 90-degree rotation of the roof opening and a shift of the wall openings on both the east and west sides to the north. While these changes may be relatively minor individually, the Planning Commission found that they diminished the overall design such that it was not in alignment with the residential design guidelines. The homeowner has appealed the Planning Commission's decision, and thus this matter is now before this council. Design guidelines of note are presented on this and the next slide. In general, the roof and wall openings contribute to the openness of the terrace and architectural symmetry. The changes reduce the roof openness along the side elevations. The uncentered wall openings, which read as windows, further diminish the overall integrity of the design. Staff appreciates the struggle that this has been for the homeowner and wants to reassure City Council that we have tried to support design solutions that the homeowner would enjoy that also conform to the design guidelines. This being an appeal, as stated by our mayor, the appellant, who is also the homeowner, will address council first, followed by an open public hearing. And in conclusion, staff recommends that council deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's determination. Staff will field questions should they arise. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we continue, I would like to ask all the council members to state for the record whether they were received any communication outside the hearing regarding this matter, or whether they have site visit, and what did they observe?
I received no ex parte communications.
I received none.
I had none.
I have none.
I have none. Now I invite the applicant, the appellant, Lori and Russell Ellingson, to the podium. You have up to 10 minutes. You may receive up to 3 minutes for the time to rebuttal. Do you wish the timer to be set at 7 minutes or 10 minutes?
I also want to congratulate you on your new appointment. I saw you during the shootings, and I think you handled the media really well. So that was just my side note.
Thank you. Before we continue about the time, you have 10 minutes. We like to say that 7 minutes, and you have 3 minutes to rebuttal, or want to continue to the 10 minutes?
Can I see where I'm at 7 minutes?
Sure, yeah.
So I can't even begin to articulate all the events that my family has been through with this remodel. In no way can this be about skylights. It's about upsetting a neighbor determined to make us pay. It's about established friendships with city personnel and government officials seemingly improperly granting favors. It's about harassment and pressure, and it's about 18 inches. I was a single mom working hard, 3 jobs to provide this home and a new life for my children away from abuse, only to enter another situation where I must defend myself and my rights against one neighbor who apparently got offended and had been inconvenienced by construction. Also against a city stewards of the community who are supposed to protect and honor governance. We do not have connections within the city. We are new to Half Moon Bay, and I believed it would be a wholesome community for our family. We don't have 20 years plus of relationships within this community. We are not friends or even know you, the city council. We are just honest people trying to live our lives peacefully. We are not hurting anyone or impeding on anyone. We have cooperated with every request. This is not to say that mistakes haven't occurred, but none were intentional. We are human. I take full responsibility for hiring the wrong contractor. I asked my contractor if adding space to the addition was a big deal, because I asked my architect to make all 3 bedrooms the same living space, but that was never amended on the drawings. I actually left for a meeting and came back to tell my contractor not to do a thing because something in me felt uneasy about it. But he had already added 18 inches to the back addition. I couldn't even tell the earth had been changed. After several unethical events, he was eventually fired. My architect, as sweet and kind as he is, the scale of the remodel and my high direction, there were countless mistakes made with the drawings. When we first learned that Paul, I don't know his last name, and Hazel Jonas had been calling code enforcement, we did everything possible to ease the tensions. We met and talked with them and tried everything we could on our side to meet their needs. Their initial concern was we were blocking the ocean view. But then when we quickly tried to amend and resolve the situation by implementing Jill's recommended design, alternative to increase their view, they rejected it and appealed. It quickly became clear that no matter what, they would appeal all events, all requests, such as skylights, a 90-degree rotation of an opening, a shift of an opening to increase all views. What I don't understand is why the city has taken such a course of action against us with property rights from the neighbor, Paul, city employees, Ben Corrales, Scott Phillips, Ferris, I don't know his last name, Joe Butcher, Jill Ekus, Mike Leotades, and Tim, and my previous contractor, Steve Hurst. The previous mayor, Deborah Penrose, has gotten involved in my home remodel. I find it difficult to believe that the city planner director places this much time and effort into modifying intentional and clear residential design guidelines and codes to deny minor changes that don't require CDP involvement without an alternative agenda. Such actions are arbitrary and capricious and reflect abuse of government power. I feel discriminated against. Why has the city only required me to pay over $8,000 for revisions that are admittedly minor in nature and do not require CDP review? Why has the city taken a stand to misrepresent residential design guidelines and codes? Why would a city official, Jill Ekus, recommend and draw a design and have us submit it for approval to say later that it is out of code? Why would a city put this many resources in place to ensure we cannot use our allocated space and approved structure the way we want? None of this makes sense. And if I'm the only citizen that must go through paying over $8,000 for a minor, non-CDP review for skylights, wouldn't that be considered discrimination? I'm here not to do anything but request that the elected community stewards honor the governance and laws that protect the homeowner's real estate property rights. I know I cannot rest until these justice prevails. I do have the slide. I just wanted to read that first. There's a couple things. If we can go back to the first slide. When I first submitted for this remodel, there was no roof attached to that second-story addition. I was later told by my architect that the city had told him we need to put a roof on it. We went through the actual process of everything, and no one appealed our design. I'm just focusing on the red tags, so if you can go to the next slide, please. When the 18 inches was added, there was a missed opportunity that the inspector could have said, move it back. There was another missed opportunity in February where the city could have rejected plans with 18 extension and told us to reform to previous measurements. Next, we submitted plans May 4th to do a conditioned space. I'm sorry, May 3rd. And that afternoon, I got a visit from Mike and Joe letting us know that the neighbors had started to complain and that they contacted their friend, the mayor. I met with Jill Ekus, and that's when she designed this for us to help and support the neighbors, and we immediately agreed. Beyond, unbeknownst to us, the neighbors, is that okay? Oh, it's 7 minutes, okay. I have 3 left, okay. Can we flip then to the slide that has residential design guidelines? Thank you. Just by looking at these 3 guidelines that Ms. Ekus has pulled out, they have pictures associated with them. None of them refer to any skylights, no openings. They don't reflect anything. The design, and this comes directly from the book, the design guidelines are not prescriptive standards, but rather recommendations that support and implement the goals, policies, and programs of the city's general plan and development standard of zoning codes. Can you flip to the next page, please? This too are other design guidelines that Jill has referred to that are supposed to somehow mention skylights or openings and roofs, and they do not refer to that at all. We can move on to the next slide. Again, we can talk about the writings that I just pulled from Jill, but there is something in 18.06, enclosed porches and solariums. There's no mention of enclosed porches needing to have a sense of openness. It seems to be an oxymoron. If you read further, we also have other codes that are mentioned that have no basis for Jill's rejection for skylights because they do not apply. And then I'd like to go more quickly to the next slide. My requests and solutions to right the wrongs to honor my rights and the rights of others by exercising your authority to mend the wrongdoings and fabrications throughout this case. For me to utilize my allotted conditioned space to maintain the first agreement the city planner director on June 7th did by letting me have a dining room at the 87th. It impedes no one. The bare minimum to allow for skylights and shift openings to optimize ocean views. And then lastly, if I have a whole book with tags of all the evidence of everything I've said that you can take and borrow and refer to and maybe come back to a different or a later decision. If you can go to the next slide, please. City staff will say that this is not an option. However, how could I appeal decision with the former mayor, Deborah Penrose, someone involved, and the highest likelihood would side with the neighbors? Additionally, California Coastal Act 3620 states that the commission may require a reasonable fee. Would you say that almost $4,000, double over $8,000 is reasonable? The next view, please. And that's just the side view. Okay. Is that it? Does he have a minute to read? Because he's a different person, right? I know that they've done that before. So is that possible that he reads this last page?
So this would be up to mayor's discretion, but I do acknowledge that they are two people, and it would be acceptable to allow the second speaker time as well.
Yes, you are permitted to read the following page.
I would suggest setting the timer for 3 minutes, as this is a public comment now.
3 minutes.
Two statements that will be presented. The city has worked with them enough. Really, is there a limit to a public servant's work/roles and responsibilities with tax-paying citizens? Wouldn't it be more reasonable to place a limit on parties that have abused code enforcement calls, have a reported incident, and have targeted the city planning director? Words from Jill Elkis, and Joe Butcher. Approval of these modifications sets a precedent that from the city, anyone can do what they want. Being human and mistakes are not allowed. Instead, the precedent set would be if you have connections, any pressure, apply pressure, stalk, harass, enough, you'll get away with it. Real estate property and civil rights should be thrown out the door. The additional time, stress, mental strain, and financial burdens aren't enough punishment. Scott Phillips told my wife a while back that the city council usually follows the planning commission's recommendation. What I find interesting is that Deborah Penrose elected Hazel Jonas to be on the planning commission. If you have the time to review both videos, you can hear a change in tone from the commission's from the initial meeting, stating, "I don't care what neighbors have to say," to "I am disappointed you are here." So the biggest offense was 18 inches not being a big deal, to responses to my statement that this is spiteful and not honoring my rights. In that case, we're going to say and mark on record that the requests don't follow guidelines. In both cases, the city had a responsibility to take the 18 inches off the record since the city had approved it and marked it minor. Lastly, I can't fathom how anyone would be interested or interject about anyone's property, especially if it impedes no one or doesn't create a nuisance. I don't understand the end goal and why city personnel would go to such length to prevent basic minor modifications.
Thank you. We now open for the public hearing. Any comments? Paul? Yes. Nagging gas. Paul Nagging gas. Elin Nagengas.
Buenas noches a todos, alcalde Jiménez y concejal.
So he's going to do it all in Spanish, and then I'm going to do a site translation for you all in English.
Buenas noches a todos, alcalde Jiménez y concejal. Mi nombre es Elin Agengast. Mis padres siempre me han enseñado la importancia de hacer lo correcto. Cuando hay un proceso de participación, es importante participar si hay algo que te importa. Estoy a favor de la recomendación del personal de la ciudad y le pido al Consejo de la Ciudad que también apoye la recomendación del personal de la ciudad para negar la apelación. Gracias.
Good evening, everyone. Mayor Jimenez, council members, my name is Ilan Nagengast. My parents have always taught me the importance of doing the right thing. When there's a participation process, it is important to participate if there is something that matters to you. I support city staff recommendation and ask the city council to also support the city staff recommendation to deny the appeal. Thank you.
Gracias, Elin. Paul Nagengas.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members, city staff, and interested community members. I am Paul Nagengast at 229 Valdez Avenue, which is next door to 225. The staff report indicates the Community Development Director made her decision, as was upheld by the Planning Commission on November 14, 2023, because the unpermitted modifications to approved plans did not meet the residential design guidelines. As the City Council needs to remember, residential design guidelines were utilized to develop project plans in order to make findings to approve the CDP Coastal Development Permit as part of PDP 21010. This project is in code enforcement process due to constructing unpermitted modifications which have been subject to after-the-fact reviews that do not meet the residential design guidelines. The residential design guidelines should not be dismissed subsequent to constructing an illegal structure because someone did not construct according to an approved permit. To determine residential design guidelines and are arbitrary and capricious on an illegal structure, we would be rewarding bad behavior and sending a terrible message to the community. There would no longer be that trust that neighbors, community, and the public have in the city to do the right thing throughout the planning, building, construction process to assure what is approved is what is built. The paragraph in the conclusion section of the staff report acknowledged the planning and building review inspection processes needed improvements due to the community concerns regarding unpermitted modifications to already approved plans. In addition, concerns for proper public process regarding major and minor modifications to approved coastal development permits are included as part of the process improvements. I wish almost 2 years ago these improved processes were in place and I did not have to concern myself and seek and pay for legal counsel for after-the-fact approval processes in the middle of a construction project. I've always said we all have room for improvement, and I trust the City Council will support staff's recommended best practices for planning and building process improvements learned from the challenges associated with this particular project. Therefore, it is necessary to complete the project in accordance with the currently approved plans as indicated in the staff report. I am in agreement with staff's recommendation. I encourage the City Council to deny 225 Valdez Avenue appeal of the Planning Commission's decision to uphold the Community Development Director's decision in accordance with the findings of the accompanying resolution to the staff report, and for staff to continue with the current code enforcement action to finish this project.
Thank you, Paul. Hazel Jonas.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This project has been ongoing for a while, as you know. For reasons stated in the staff report of the Community Development Director's decision to deny, after the fact CDB modifications, I agree with the Planning Commission's decision, although I wasn't part of that decision because I had to recuse myself. But I do believe that the Planning Commission deliberated this project not once, but twice, and made the correct decision. So I urge you to support your Planning Director's decision and the Planning Commission's decision to deny the appeal. Thank you.
Do you have any more public comment? Now, close the public hearing. There's no time for rebuttal. City Council.
Yes, I would like to just make a statement about my supposed involvement in this scenario. This is the first time I've heard anything about this project. I knew nothing about it before. Hazel Joannis is not my appointee to the Planning Commission, and I had no discussions with either Paul Nagengast or Hazel Joannis about this project. So I don't know where that information got to you, how you got that, but it's not true. Thank you.
The thing that concerns me most is the fact that our Planning Commission, which has been appointed by all of us, and remember, we've been elected, so we represent the city, and as such, we have picked subject matter experts to be on the Planning Commission, people who work hard and have studied what the design guidelines are and what the city requires of its homeowners. So I completely agree that, especially since the decision of the Planning Commission in November was unanimous, that we need to support them. They're the ones who know how the city guidelines should be implemented, and I support the staff's recommendation that we deny the appeal.
Any more comment? Councilmember?
So when a council member has to hear an appeal, we have to review, findings by the approving body, which is the Planning Commission in this case. And it seems to me that there's an extensive record before the Planning Commission that there was quite a bit of deliberation on the part of planning commissioners to review the information and make findings. And I could not fault the grounds for their findings. I can't go by he said, she said, who talked to whoever, who knows whoever. I can't make decisions that way. I reviewed the findings. They seemed consistent with the city's rules and regulations. And I'm going to join Vice Mayor Rohrbach in denying the appeal.
Councilmember Brownstone.
Yeah, I agree with my fellow council members. I would deny the appeal. I understand that there may have been different intentions, but intentions really aren't the issue here. It's following guidelines, making objective decisions that support those guidelines. I think we have a good planning commission here. Head of our planning department, Jill Ikas, is someone who's very detail-oriented. I have not known her to be influenced by outsiders. So I think there's been a lot of integrity in this process. And yeah, so I support the denial of this appeal.
I hear your story, and I'm not friends with the defendants. But, in this case, I have to honor, the recommendation for more staff, for planning commission, or planning developer. And I support deny the appeal.
We do need a motion.
And would like make a motion.
I move that we deny the appeal of the Planning Commission decision to uphold the Community Development Director's decision denying minor modifications to an approved coastal development permit and architectural review allowing the construction of an addition and covered terrace on the second floor and an expanded western balcony at an existing single-family home located at 225 Valdez Avenue in the R1 Single-Family Residential Zoning District, based on the findings contained in the resolution, which is Attachment 1.
Second.
Councilmember Brownstone?
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rohrbach?
Yes.
Mayor Jimenez?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Now we move on to our resolutions and staff reports.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council and community. I am Moz Bozerguina, Public Works Director, City Engineer for the City of Half Moon Bay. One second while I pull this up. All right, I'm here tonight to provide a presentation on the municipal energy projects with regards to some electrification work and other ancillary work that we are proposing as part of our ongoing sustainability programs. Just a little, this is our outline for the presentation. There will be a couple of options and I'll go into more details about those options. And then we're really looking at this as a study session to really hear the comments and concerns from our council and members of the community to better inform us. And then we'll actually be bringing back items to the council for further discussion and options. So a little bit of background. The city has been working towards electrification goals for a number of years now. It's been identified in a number of documents since 2019 when sustainability became one of the main priority areas for the City Council. And specifically looking at adding additional photovoltaic infrastructure for our municipal facilities. It was referenced in our implementation plans, and we've also had engaged with the Career Unified School District about a potential power purchase agreement. And since then, we've actually continued having those conversations and with Career Unified through 2022. And then at that point, the Peninsula Clean Energy came out with the larger PPA call. And so we started the conversation there, and then both Career Unified School District as well as the city started having conversations with Peninsula Clean Energy with regards to a larger PPA, which would allow us economies of scale and greater return for the investment. And then I also wanted to just reference a couple of the policies, our municipal energy policies within our Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, Phase 1, that was recently adopted. I won't read them here, but it speaks a lot to increasing our renewable energy supply, electrifying our municipal facilities, and looking at additional efficiencies where we can. So again, the recommendation tonight is really to get feedback and for the council to provide further direction to staff as we move forward with the two options that we have. Bless you. So, we have two opportunities tonight to discuss, and the two opportunities are really structurally they're a little different, and so that's what we'll get into those options right now. So the first option is the power purchase agreement that we talked about. That would be through Peninsula Clean Energy, and so that option would be entering into that PPA as part of a solar storage and a solar and storage project with multiple agencies throughout San Mateo County. And then the option two, which we've been exploring with another partner, Wildan, is to actually own our own photovoltaic system and complete a more comprehensive project that looks at other building elements outside of just the photovoltaic system. And while also incorporating the electrification, looking at EV charging and some other things that go beyond the scope of what the PPA with PC would be. So now I'll go into a little bit more details on the different opportunities that we've got. So again, so the first opportunity with PCE is really that power purchase agreement component. So essentially, it would be a third party that would come in. They would own it. They would own the photovoltaic systems. And we're specifically talking about two, as far as the scope, we're specifically talking about two facilities, the sheriff's substation and City Hall. Those are the two specific ones that we've been talking about with option one. We did a number of initial assessments to determine feasibility for the facilities that we do have, and those were the two related to PV that made the most sense with respect to shade analysis, location, and geographic positioning. And so those were the two that were identified to move forward. And with this option, the city would agree to host these systems on our sites for approximately 20 years. That would be the commitment. And there's some potential for increases of that. We could go up to 25 years based on the structure of the PPA. And what that would do, it would lower our energy bill, give us a little bit more predictability as far as what our costs would be with regards to escalation of retail rates. And so just a little bit, what does that mean as far as these retail rates? So it's really about trying to lock in some of these power, the rates for kilowatt hours earlier on in the process, knowing that escalation of costs of energy are going to continue as the needs and demands are continue to increase for electricity versus other modes of other sources of power. And so the California Public Utilities Commission estimates about 3.7% power increase escalation. So just to give you a little bit of reference to where those savings would look like. So that would be an annual. They're estimating that as an annual increase of 3.7. So for us, with this PPA, we would be locked into a 0 to 2%, and there will be more information on that as we move forward. But then but that's the projections. As far as the actual numbers, the Pacific Gas and Electric had an 18% increase in electric costs in 2023. And right now, and they've already said that they're looking at 5% annually until 2026. So there's definitely increasing costs that we'd be able to cap with going through with the PPA. So and then going over the benefits, of this first opportunity, again, as a power purchase agreement, there's no upfront costs required to enter. Again, it lowers our energy rate bills, provides a little bit more predictability, and when we're looking at our long-term budgeting, And then it also utilizes this NEM 2.0 pricing structure. So I'll give a little high level for folks that may not be familiar with NEM. I'm sorry, I don't know what that acronym stands for. Council Member Penrose, please. I might be able to figure that out at some point, but so it's really about the structure of these power purchase agreements, and the main change between this 2.0, which is the older version of these agreements, and 3.0, which will be something moving forward, is it caps the amount of energy that if you produce more than you use, it caps how much you can actually PG&E would buy from you. The cost and so it reduces your ability to generate additional revenue. So that's a pretty significant change. And what that means is, but again, with this PPA, if this is the option we decide to move forward with, we are within our timeline to be able to utilize the 2.0 pricing structure. Some of the considerations to think of, and again, this is with regards to the two facilities that we've talked about, is that for the PPA with BCE, we would need to do some work upfront. And what would that entail? There's some roof repairs that would be needed based on the locations of these the PV panels. So City Hall roof would be something that we need to do in advance of the project. So there's a component about doing a little bit more before we can start getting into this, getting the work done for this agreement. And there's also an internet connectivity component, which we would need to do before the project, before this PPA would move forward. The other consideration is, as I mentioned, it's only looking at the photovoltaics for those two facilities. Outside of these little repairs that we would, repairs and some of the other ancillary work we need to do, some trenching work and some other things of that nature. It only looks at the photovoltaic elements. And then as part of the structure for the PPA, this is very common, the entity, PC, would retain the ownership rights for that renewable energy credits. And then at the end of the term, we would be required to either purchase the PV system at market rate, or the system would be removed. That's an option. And I had a question about and actually we have members of PC on Zoom as well as Wildan. So there are, if there's any specific questions, I believe they're available and can jump on and provide a little more detail. But essentially the way that it's, we're trying to figure out what that market value would look like. And it sounds like it's a little bit open-ended right now. It is subject to confirmation of both parties. So that's something that I was just starting to dig into more recently. And we're still in the middle. We're still trying to determine what that would look like. But essentially it'd be, we would have to purchase the system, or it would be removed by PCE, either way. So that was the first option. Again, purchase power agreement with PCE, and it would be specific to the photovoltaic systems.
Can you tell us the upfront cost for the two things, the roof repair and the internet connectivity?
Yeah, the roof repair is the pricier one. We're it's about $70,000 or so. And the reality is that work, it's an aging roof on City Hall. So whether that's something that we are looking to realize now and repair, or we do it in the next couple of years, it is a cost that will be coming up at some point, just based on the age of it. And I'm sorry, the second. The internet connectivity is we were just looking at some rough numbers. It could be anywhere between 1,000 and 8,000. So it's not a huge investment, but it is something. And that would be per facility.
Yeah. Maz, does option one include any storage?
Not as part of the original scope, but I believe there was potential for storage add-on in the future, but it was not part of what the original scope was.
I personally think it's very important that we have storage.
Okay. And and think about it this way. The part of what the storage is important, but part of what makes the power purchase agreements lucrative is that ability to sell that power back to the utility provider. So that's where you can actually offset some of those things. So but again, we can look more into those details. And storage or not, I agree. Having some level of storage at each of our locations does make a lot of sense for many reasons.
Hey, Miles, before you're almost finished with option one, right?
Yes.
So I just want, have you estimate any numbers? So we just talked about the cost. So what about the savings? If we're thinking 3 to 5% reduction in costs compared to retail, at least the numbers you were throwing out. So I don't know what the average cost per year is now, and then how much would we be saving each year based on the 3 to 5%? And then over 20 years, I mean, that would help then when we compare it to option two.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. The numbers are a little bit, they're still working on the numbers. There was some projections that we received recently from both PCE and Wildan. In the rough order of magnitude, I think over the 30-year life, 20 to 30-year life we're talking about, the savings we're looking at is in the $300,000 range.
How much is it?
$300,000.
Okay, thanks.
And depending on which structure we move forward, which option we move forward with, either option, we would come back with more detailed numbers as we move forward. Because some of these things are still, it's really about figuring out the structure we want to move forward with, and then some of the fine tuning of the financing and the numbers are still to be determined.
Plus, there's many things that can influence the retail price over years.
Absolutely.
But we will still have only that cap at 0 to 2%.
That'll be in the contract as part of the PPA, correct?
Because based on history, I've never seen rates really go down much, and there's all these things that tend to increase retail rates. So the savings could be more substantial in that sense. We're saying minimally about $300K based on current numbers, but sky's the limit depending on a million world factors going on. So,
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Of course. And then, then the second option that we've talked about is actually, this is the one that's being discussed with Wildan, and this would be the city owning the solar system and upfront, and also getting a couple of other improvements as part of that oversight and installation of the PV system.
Maz, who's the provider for option two? You just mentioned it, but I didn't catch it.
Wildan.
Spell it.
Wildan.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, and Wildan's, they do a lot of energy audits. They've worked, they have a number of projects within California, and even, they're a national company, and this is definitely something that's in their wheelhouse. They've been doing quite a bit of energy audits and supporting different jurisdictions into getting these types of projects off the ground.
But they're a for-profit company. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Up to this point, yeah. So up to this point, both PC and Wildan have been very supportive and communicative. We've been working through the different details and scopes, and they're a little different. They're not apples to apples comparisons, and that's why we wanted to have this discussion tonight. So the second option would be, some of the takeaways. The system would be the city system to start. We would have say on who would be the installer, who would be maintaining the system. With the PPA side, some of those things would be covered under the PPA, so there may not be as much opportunities to make changes to individuals. We can also look at leveraging some of our savings and incentives to include some additional facility electrification, EV charging. So that was the other piece, was we could look at incorporating an EV charger with this project through Wildan. PP's project scope is a little bit more defined. Again, like I mentioned about the two sites and really about the PV for the energy usage of those buildings. With this option, we could consider looking at EV charging upgrades at City Hall parking lot as well as the sheriff's substation. There'd be quite a bit of finance. Again, this would be another thing. There's some financial opportunities here as well, but then that's where the difference is. There's a little bit more cost involved with this one. You could go with there's 3 different financial tiers, and again, we can if this is the approach we want to take, we can start looking further into the numbers and come back with more detailed estimates. But just high level, the first option would be zero down. And if we did that zero down, we could finance everything. And at the end of the 30-year life of the project, we would break even. We'd start, so we would start getting, and that's incorporating our NEM 2.0. We would, that's incorporating the amount of power we would generate and sell back into the system. That's so if you look at everything from that perspective, our gain, we would be realizing our savings at the end of the life of this project. The second iteration was really looking at what our existing budgeting is for some of our systems. So one of the big components of this is we have an HVAC system that is aging out at City Hall. And one of the main things we want to do is replace that with the heat pump. And so this option would incorporate that project into the PV system project, and it would be all done and managed by Willdan as one construction project. And so if we go, so that we have about $200,000 set aside for those HVAC system replacements, as well as some of the roof repairs. And so we could utilize that as part of our budget, and there's a couple of other grants that are and other incentives that are available. And so that puts us in a range where we are closer to realizing our gains at year 18. It would, I'm sorry, say that again?
Under benefits, it says one of the benefits is lowest energy cost.
Yes, because whatever we generate, we're not paying anybody, right? So we own the system. So we don't pay for any of the power that we get out of the photovoltaics, out of the PV system. Under the purchase power agreement, you would be paying a subsidized rate. It would be a lower rate than what would be on the regular market. But in this case, because we own it, there's no investment to pay back with those rates. So we wouldn't, whatever we generate and use there's no payment for it other than maintaining it. We would be getting immediate, but again, you would have an initial investment. Whereas on the PPA side, you don't have an initial investment and you pay monthly. So that's the main difference.
Maz, let me ask the same question about option 2. Is there any contemplation of storage as part of doing this?
We had talked about it at a high level, but we hadn't really dug into it. This one gives us a little bit more flexibility with storage because, again, the structure, because Willdan's working directly with the city and not a larger grouping of entities. The PCE one is a little bit more strict because for the economy of scale, they are trying to make it feasible and to be able to implement in multiple jurisdictions. So that's why they focus more on the PV side and not so much on the building stuff. That's left to the entities to bring up to standard in advance of that install.
So under option 1, we'd save a minimum of $300,000 we talked about, right? Under option 2, we break even after 20 years. Is that what you said?
Yes, I believe at about 18 years, we would.
So, yeah.
Yeah, here.
Well, option 2, option A.
Yeah.
It's 2A.
There's three, that's what's, and I apologize, it is a little confusing, but there's 3 different iterations in option 2. Option 1 is pretty straightforward. The investment, the scope is defined, and the investment is by a third party. The city would realize, the energy savings right up front by paying a lower rate, and it's pretty straightforward as far as what the project and what the scope is. Option 2, we have more wiggle room. We can look at different opportunities. We actually looked at, so there's this holistic approach. So here's some of the benefits. Again, lowest energy cost because whatever we're generating, we're not paying for. There's no investor to pay back. The holistic project approach, we would be able to do the PVs and an additional facility electrification, like the HVAC systems for heat pumps, EV charging, and roof repairs all under one contract. We would look at capturing $620,000 in general project incentives. That's through grants and other funds that are available to us for electrification processes. And then the city would retain those energy credits.
But how much would we have to spend in terms of a loan for option 2?
We'll get to that right now. So
Okay.
we don't. So option 2A, we don't really realize those net positive financial benefits because of the initial install costs. You're basically paying that off as part of the loan after your incentives. Option 2, you'd start looking at these are with some incentives and some of the city's dollars into that pot would give us year 23 would be our net realization. And then option 2C would require upfront capital investment, and we would realize those net positive benefits at year 18. So it's a much higher initial investment. So the higher the initial investment is, the sooner you realize those gains.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see all the numbers there, because at the end of the, at the end of the day, we're looking at structural changes to our budget because we're in a deficit.
Yeah.
So it's just really good to know how much financial output we would have. I mean, option A, it's clear, it's 75,000 plus another 1 to 5,000. How much we'd have to spend to get that going, and then we know savings start. In option 2, I just don't really have a firm grasp yet on what the annual expenditure would be, even with the incentives, et cetera, because I'm not looking at the total numbers. So that would be really helpful to know what the impact each year would be on our budget of outgoing money, the out-the-door price each year.
Sure.
Because we don't break even for 20 years, so we need to know what's going to go on, what it's going to look like over 20 years. Will it be a set amount each year? And what's that amount would help?
Yeah, I mean, some of the breakdowns we've seen, and again, these numbers will, they'll be refined, and that's why we didn't present them, because they're not quite ready on either option. But essentially, yeah, you would start paying, depending on how much for this option 2, you would start paying a higher amount earlier on, and it would, there's some incentives early on that kind of, for the next few years, it would really reduce the cost. But then the annual picks up after a few years, and then it starts tailoring down. With the option 1, again, none of it's upfront, and we just get locked into this deal. And at the end of it, we have to determine whether we want to purchase the system that's installed, or if we want to allow it, because that's the other option. We don't have, for the PPA, we don't have to purchase it. After 20 years, the city can decide that we're done, and they can come and remove that infrastructure.
Moss, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think part of the challenge here is it's hard, they're not apples to apples, but I think it's important to point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, under option 1, where there's no upfront cost for the PV system, we're still expending $70-something thousand on the roof repair sometime in the near future, and, well, I guess about $200,000 in roof repair and heat pump.
And the HVAC system.
And when we do those, do we get the same kind of incentives that we would get by doing the PV work, or is there added benefit by grouping everything together?
You get the added benefit of the economy of scale by grouping some of these things, because a lot of the contractors, they'll do the PV work, they have that capability to do some of those roof repairs that are associated with it. They do the electrical work, the conduit runs. With the PPA, it's a little bit more specific, and again, there is some work we have to do up front to get us to that point.
Yeah. So I think, and I've seen some of the draft numbers, obviously they weren't ready for public review, but I think at the end of the day, when you get to 20 years, kind of that time period, the numbers are kind of a wash, but what you get for those numbers is different, and I think that's what we're trying to get to more than anything tonight is, do we want to go all in and receive all the other benefits that come with option 2, but that requires that upfront investment versus a little more conservative approach, which is option 1, and then we have a little more flexibility about not the roof repairs, because that has to be done up front, but the heat pump and other improvements when and how we do those. So, and if we do some of those. At the end of the day, I think at the end of 20 years or so, 23 years under option 2B, you're kind of getting to the same point as far as the cost goes, but under option 2, we're getting additional amenities built into the program because of those economies of scale.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the option 2 approach. I'm a little bit worried about what might happen in November of 2024 and potentially, maybe lose incentives that we could take advantage of like this year. I like the all-in approach. I like the idea that we can, achieve some self-sufficiency rather than, relying on, a third party. So I do want more in the way of numbers. I'd like to see in chart form kind of a thing. But I think it makes sense from a policy perspective to look at the ownership option. So I'm in favor of option 2 and looking more deeply at that.
Yeah, I would like to know what kind of financing we're talking about and what are the grants that are available. So even before I decide to go with option 2, which sounds maybe more attractive, what's it going to cost? What is the upfront cost? And it could be with the grants that are out there that the cost front is going to be very little. But I don't know that, so.
So actually, Veronica Vostenak is on the Zoom, and Jessica, if we could move her over. She's been working with both providers and getting more information even today. So she can speak a little bit about the numbers and what we're looking at right now.
Good evening, council, members of the public. Sorry, I can't be there in person, but I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me okay and the sound issues are good. I just wanted to hop on. I know it's a little bit confusing. We're at a little bit of a crossroads with both of these options where we need to make a more formal commitment in order to narrow down some of these numbers a little bit more. Neither party felt comfortable with us sharing their exact numbers that they've shared with us publicly tonight, but Maz went over a little bit of the latest and greatest we've heard from PCE, and I can say that getting at some of your questions, looking at how much would be financed, again, we need to do more detailed studies in order to nail down this number, but right now we're looking at about $650,000. We do have $200,000 budgeted for that HVAC project, and Peninsula Clean Energy also has a government building electrification loan or grant that will be available to us, where we should be able to look at that option 2C with money, or 2B with money that we already have budgeted or will be receiving. So we have an opportunity like option 1 for 0 down, but we can leverage some of the funding that we have available now for that 2B. That 2C is if you would like to realize some of these benefits earlier on, if the council decided that you wanted to put some additional upfront capital investment, maybe an additional $100,000 to $200,000, then we can receive those positive financial benefits earlier on. I hope that provides some clarity, but I can also answer some more specific questions if they're still lingering.
The former mayor has indicated that Wildan is a legit outfit. I just hope that it's really the case. I mean, if we're going to be putting all our eggs in that basket, I certainly would hope that we work with a legitimate public company, or not public, but legitimate company. And then let me throw out some weird thing. Are we pretty much convinced that City Hall is going to be here in 20 years? Or are we going to be moving it? Does anyone want to chime in on that?
Well, I'll say we can't speak for future councils or staff, but this council has made it abundantly clear to me that for the time being, City Hall will remain in that location. Maybe that is something we need to throw into the mix of considerations, and I appreciate you bringing that up, is what happens in 10 years if the city needs to move and sell the building? What happens with option one? I think under option two, if we own it, that can be transferred, but certainly I think a variable we should put in the mix, so appreciate that question.
Yeah, that's a good one. I would assume under the PPA there would be some constraints about that and what that would look like with regards to City Hall and our ownership.
And Maz, just so you know, we've got Rafael Reyes from Peninsula Clean Energy, and his hand is raised. I don't know if it'd be worth, if that's a public comment or if that's really part of this discussion.
I think we've gone through the meat of the presentation, and just my goal was really just to explain the two different options, the apples and oranges, and absolutely, if Rafael's available and wants to speak, happy to have him on.
Mayor, is that okay?
Yes, let's have Rafael on the public comment.
Okay. Not yet.
Yes, Rafael Reyes.
Hi, this is Rafael Reyes, Director of Energy Programs for Peninsula Clean Energy. Thank you for taking the time to consider this opportunity. I thought I would offer some additional background that might be of use to you in your deliberations. The first is that what we call the shorthand, the government solar program that you're discussing in option A, is one of a suite of programs that we offer to local governments. We have a government fleet program and the soon-to-launch government building electrification program, which has been mentioned in option 2. I would just note that our government electrification program can be used with option 1 also. So it is not somehow unique to option 2. Second, the solar program is specifically designed to pass through to local governments as much of the economic value as possible. PCE is taking no profit, if you will, through this. We are solely covering our costs. In fact, arguably less than our costs, because our cost of capital that's included in the PPA as financing the system is set at 2%. Which is pretty difficult to find through another avenue. I would note that also that the intention here is to bring those benefits, economic benefits, to the cities under the net energy metering 2.0 rules that were mentioned earlier. If the city should decide to go with another provider, certainly we would provide the interconnection materials that we developed, and the city can move forward with another approach to installing solar. I would just note that the city would need to move very quickly to meet the NEM 2.0 deadlines. Which are aggressive, and not meeting the deadlines would have very substantial impact on the economics of the solar systems. Lastly, I would add, there was a question with regards to storage. The designs do include a degree of storage readiness. The reason that storage was not included at this time relates to the NEM 2.0 rules. And if we had attempted to put in storage out of the gate, we would have triggered a move to NEM 3.0 and drastically altered the economics for the program. So we're really here, as you know, as a public peer public agency to be at the service of the cities, and we would be happy to support whatever direction Half Moon Bay wishes to go. But I do again want to emphasize that our building electrification program will be available as an option independent of the pathway that you choose to go.
Thank you, Rafael. If we don't have any more clarifying questions, can we move to public comment? We have Crystalline.
Thank you, Crystalline, resident, 32 Ventura. Fun fact about me, my dad has been doing solar since 1979, so I grew up in this. And so I just wanted to echo some of the statements from council that are all very wonderful, thoughtful questions. In my many years in solar, I've never heard somebody buy outright and regret it. I've heard many people go the, what would be option A, and 10, even 5 years down the road, something changes in their lives, with the building, and then all of a sudden, all these things are triggered, and they have to figure out what they're gonna do now, and they don't necessarily save money at that point. I think we know a lot is changing in solar, as it has all the time. So I think there's some more flexibility in option number 2. And also what was mentioned is the storage is very important. When we had the planned power shutoffs in October of 2019, many people who had leased solar systems tried to go back and have storage put in and were denied. And it was a complete shock to them. And then we've also had many people sell their houses, and it also become a debacle, that you either have to buy it outright and then sell, or include it, and then the person you're selling to has to buy it, and it's this whole thing. So there's definitely pros and cons to the money bits of either end, but in my 43 years of solar experience, I've never heard somebody be mad that they just went all in and got it and got to do what they needed to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystalline. We have one more public comment.
Joan Winters, 250B Pilarcitos Avenue. I have a question. How long are the photovoltaic panels likely to last these days?
That's a good question. Rough order, about 20 years.
Right. So if you don't get the money back for 23 years, what is the plan? And how much do new panels cost?
Those are definitely considerations as part of the financing options, whether we go with, fully financed or not, depending on that structure for the option 2.
But I'd also like to say I like the option 2 with greater resilience and control and with storage. So we're getting so dependent on electricity that when you're in a situation, which I've been in recently without it, and it's getting very cold, among other things, it's really important to have a backup system. I'm still trying to work out what I can do at home since I'm in the process of moving to upstate New York where it gets very cold.
I have a comment on Zoom.
Go ahead.
Jason Boyd.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Wonderful. Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and staff and public as well. My name is Jason Boyd. I'm an energy program manager with Willdan. I wanted to make a couple of quick points. First of all, Willdan, we are founded and headquartered in California. I've been here since 1964, and we have the honor of serving the city of Half Moon Bay for over 25 years now. We are really proud to have been working with staff on developing this potential program that is being considered as option 2. I guess actually first quickly address a question from another citizen there. Solar systems are seen having 30+ year lifespans, and the technology continues to improve. So you can expect pretty good longevity out of the system. And I guess I would say, first of all, I think there are 2 good options being presented by staff to council here. I think either way, the city moving forward with investing in solar is a smart decision. When it comes to option 2, you know, what we've been working closely with staff for quite a while now to develop this plan, which is really addressing the city's goals for adding renewable energy, but also accomplishing goals of electrification, as well as addressing some other energy-related deferred maintenance needs, all at once in a way that is cost-effective and realizes economies of scale. Doing so while maximizing the savings that can be achieved through the program, as well as the incentives that can be captured, and ultimately doing as much work as possible to accomplish all the goals that the city has at the lowest overall cost. So, really excited about what we've been working with the city to put together. Happy to help address any further questions if needed, and appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any more public comment? Bring it back to the council?
I just have a quick question. So when you talk about the sheriff's substation, you're talking about also the EOC? Would serve the EOC?
Because of the way the shading is, we're really looking at the sheriff's substation component and not on the backside of that building. So we're looking at the parking lot area, specifically at the sheriff's substation, right in the parking, right closest to us on the Ted Adcock.
So what would that system serve? Just the sheriff's substation?
I think based on the energy numbers, it would be servicing the majority of the sheriff's substation and some of the EOC, but not entirely.
Because it would be great to think that we'd have a system that makes our emergency services more resilient during stressed times. Yeah.
Yeah, 555 Kelly and Main Street are now going to be our tallest buildings in town, right? 555 especially. So, one of the things we might want to be looking at is doing solar there. There's no shading at 555 Kelly. I mean, 555 Kelly may be even impacting Ted Adcock. With shading.
Yeah, Ted Adcock, even without that proposed project, it wasn't feasible. That's why we didn't incorporate it in either project.
Right. Just a thought.
Yeah, those are great considerations.
I'm sorry, I just was hoping for clarification. You said Kelly and Maine. Are you?
I'm talking about the new building going up on the
Across from City Hall.
Northeast corner of Kelly and Main. Yes,
okay.
Across from City Hall.
Okay. Were you suggesting that maybe we do something there?
Well, just suggesting we talk to them about putting in solar panels, that's all.
Okay.
If shading is an issue and that's limiting what we can do, then why don't we maximize what we can do? That's my thinking.
Sure. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I got a couple of. So, I'm hesitant to make any decision about it, option A or B, till we have more numbers. Where are these incentives? Who's funding the incentives? Is these state or federal, or both?
I believe they're mostly state. There is some PC money.
Yeah. So when you talked about the election, since they're state incentives, I'm not as concerned because I think California is always going to be providing incentives for a while. So when we say we're going to lose incentives or what new incentives might come, it's just one of those unknowns, And I don't want to feel like we're being pressured into something. Oh, you're going to lose this deal here. You know, if you don't make this decision right now, well, new incentives come up. I'm also a little bit, you know, when you said that you couldn't get any, both vendors were hesitant to give you numbers. I wasn't crazy about that, working with people who don't want to give us numbers. I'm just saying, kind of rose me a little weird. I'm glad Gildan is legit. As we both all know, legitimate companies also go bankrupt. You know, it's not, things can happen, who takes over contracts later. But when we look at our whole budget, we have a deficit of $2 million. We don't want to dip into reserves. We don't know how much we'll be getting from hotel tax. That's why we look at the budget every quarter now to kind of see. So when you say we could take $200,000 that's already budgeted here, there, we're constantly looking at trade-offs because we don't know how much revenue we're going to get in. We don't want to increase our deficit. So before we start, you know, playing tic-tac-toe with all these pieces of budget, that's why it's better to have some real solid numbers and how much we are willing to put out in a year. And, you know, technology is getting cheaper and better in solar all the time. And there's huge innovations being made. But, you know, once we agree to a certain investment and structure, it could be 2 years later that could have been a much more less expensive technology that's out there. So, so I'm just saying, we're trying to balance all this. I mean, if we were $3 million budget plus versus, you know, minus, yeah, we might be able to, you know, roll some dice here, but I'm just trying to be a little more cautious about saying pursue A or B until we at least get a little more numbers and detail around what that infrastructure looks like, and do we, you know, get stuck with something that's obsolete 5 years from now? Those are things I just don't know enough about the technology.
As for incentives, it looks like the state is beginning to roll back incentives for solar. Where the incentives are going to be is in storage. That's what they're trying to incentivize now. And that's probably what you're going to see in terms of legislation during the coming year, and also actions by the CPUC. So, and of course there's federal for now, but how long that's going to last, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's a crapshoot at this point.
Anyone else? No? Yeah.
Well, after you, I just
go ahead.
I have some clarifying questions. You know, Moz and I have talked a lot about this, but the two questions I want to just clarify. The money that we are suggesting we could potentially use out of the capital budget, that's money we are going to have to spend in the next few years because we're going to have systems failing. Is that correct?
Yes, our HVAC system, it seems like it's on its last few legs.
Felt like it this morning.
Yeah, yes. No, it's been problematic.
Well, we could buy jackets for all the staff, right? Well, so that's a point I do want to make, is that it's not like we're taking discretionary spending and stuff that we could put off. I think we're talking about trying to utilize money that we're going to expend either way, and there may be opportunities to leverage that. It's just the thought. The other thing is when Rafael from PCE was speaking, he talked about the urgency of making a decision to take advantage of NEMS 2.0. Moz, do we know the deadline for that? I think we've talked about it again.
I mean, yeah. So if the opportunity was to go with the PPA with PCE, we would be looking at coming back on the 6th of February for a resolution, so that we can move forward with that agreement. And that NEM 2.0, the net energy metering pricing structure, that's where it's really critical. This is our opportunity to get into that with the PPA. And construction would need to be completed by 2026 in order for us to keep that structure. If we own it, that NEM 2.0 structure isn't as important, and we can start looking more into the different iterations. But that's where we come up against, as far as timing constraints, is whether, if we want to move forward with this PPA structure, we need to know soon. If we want to go forward with the other option and we own it, we have more flexibility there as far as timing a little bit.
We would just need the numbers, what the loan amount would be and interest rates. Again, what's the outgoing number per year if we go with option 2? In other words, the vendors really need to tell us their numbers and not hold back for us to make a decision.
And I guess the challenge with that is that, up to this point, so just to be clear, Wilden has been doing this work and coordinating with us with no compensation. This has been out of their own pocket. And if we were to go forward with them, then this next step would be really defining that, the costs, the improvement costs, really getting into the nitty-gritty of the design itself. And that would be something we'd be doing that would be the next step in that process if we went there. And that would be part of the long-term costs. If we, at that stage, we still don't have to move forward with this. If we decide at that stage with numbers that the council does not like the way that the financing is looking, we can walk away from that. The only thing we'd do is the cost of their time to get to that point.
And we may have lost our opportunity for the NEM 2.0.
And we would have lost our opportunity for the NEM because we wouldn't be able to turn the clock back, correct?
Maz, do you think if we came back on February 6th with, it doesn't sound like we're going to be able to refine the numbers much, but maybe we can lay them out a little differently and try to include everything that we know.
Well, yeah, I think.
Is that still enough time if they made a decision, if the council made a decision on the 6th and say they said, we want to go with option A, the PCE option? Are we putting ourselves at risk of missing out on this pricing?
I think we're cutting it close. I don't know if Rafael's still on the Zoom. And
He is.
Yeah, Rafael, would you mind sharing the timing? I know that PC was hoping that they would get our answer sooner, but they've been willing to allow us to have this conversation.
Sure. And first of all, let me preface this by saying that if capital is available, purchasing a system outright usually provides better economics than a power purchase agreement, usually. What is a little bit less certain in this scenario is we have seen local governments go to bid on installations of relatively smaller systems like these, and few bidders come to the table and they can be very expensive. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case here. And Wildan may have partnerships where they can guarantee good prices, and if so, if the capital is available, the financials are usually very, very strong, and that may be a very good option for the city. I do want to correct one point that I think was maybe misstated earlier, and that is that the NEM 2.0 deadlines will apply regardless of whether you own the systems or go with a power purchase agreement. Because if you own the systems, you will still be subject to the net energy metering rules that were in place at the time based on the timing of the system deployment. And part of the reason Peninsula Clean Energy is moving aggressively is to make sure that all participating agencies get the best possible economics on these solar systems. We did provide earlier today the economics to staff. So that calculation has literally just today been made. The reason we weren't able to provide it earlier is that we were going through a competitive procurement process to identify the specific construction vendor, and we've been negotiating with them around the pricing. So that information is in hand with Veronica, who may or may not have been able to forward it in time for this presentation. But in any case, we're committed to work with the city on whatever path the city chooses to move forward with, including addressing concerns the city may have with regards to, if the building is sold or any matters like that. And finally, I would note that the pricing that we have provided is with a 0% escalator, and that 0%, with the 0% escalator, we're projecting across the two sites, $470,000 in savings over 20 years, and simple savings, $315,000 on a net present value basis. And then after the 20 years, then the city derives all the benefits of the system after purchase at fair market value. And we're committed to make that as beneficial to the city as possible. Again, we're a public agency. We're really establishing this program to serve local governments. And again, the principal benefit of PPA is no upfront cost. But again, if you have the capital on hand, then often you can derive better economics by purchasing outright.
And I apologize if I missed it, but the initial question was really about the timing of NEM.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I didn't answer that question. So the reason, what we're seeking is action at the earliest available opportunity. There is not a hard deadline to that. We are engaged with our construction partner and willing to go out to do final designs in advance of having executed contracts. So that allows us some flexibility. But the final interconnection agreements must be completed by April 14th to meet the NEM 2 requirements. If that date is not met, then it will substantially compromise the economics for the city, regardless of whether it's under the PPA or unowned system.
Okay, so if I understand that correctly, April 14th is that date. Is that correct?
Well, yes, what we would like to see happen is the way we're approaching this is we know that each jurisdiction's legal counsel in some cases has questions. We would like to make sure that there's no fatal flaws, meaning any major issues that would prevent the city from moving forward and executing the PPA. If we get that confirmation, we will move forward with the site visits and redesigns. I would say, we would like to have PPAs executed in February or March at the latest. So there's a little bit of flexibility in the timing, but we certainly want to have those executed in advance of finalizing the interconnection agreements.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you, Rafael.
Yeah, and then ultimately the construction 2026 is still the deadline for either option as well.
So the recommendation I'm going to make, now that I think that was helpful clarity, is that we will come back on February 6th with, it sounds like there's new numbers that we didn't even have before this meeting. Although I guess at net present value, it's very close to what you said, so maybe that was incorporated. But we'll come back February 6th with a shorter item, as much detail as we can possibly provide.
Yeah.
Try to compare them side by side and capture really the specific differences between the two. And that still gives us time. I've checked with Catherine, and it looks like our council's already looked at some of the agreements with PCEs, so that work is already in process. And I appreciate Rafael pointing out that the deadline is there's a lot that has to happen before that deadline. But I think if we came back February 6th and then came back for a decision on February 6th, or direction, and then we would, as quickly as possible, turn around those documents to get approval for execution. If we select the PCE option, otherwise we have a little more time to work with Weldon on their numbers.
A little bit more, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is that?
Thank you. Appreciate your time and patience on this item.
I appreciate all the work you've done. These are tough decisions. Lots of good things can happen too. We might get some other grants in, and then all of a sudden we don't have as much of a deficit. It goes both ways. But, you know, on the Finance Committee, we like to be a little cautious, so just in case, and not have to dip too much in reserves if we don't have to. So, great. Sounds good. I'd much rather have the Rolls Royce than settle for a Chevy, so I can get the best work.
And as always, we're going to consult our resident jack of all trades, Crystalline, who just shared another talent that we didn't know she had.
So we're going to continue February 6th as a...
Yeah, I think the direction we received tonight is to bring back additional information on February 6th. Is that fair?
To be able to compare the costs of both of the systems, both of the options.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. We will do that.
Thank you. Move on to future discussions or item agenda. No. City Council reports. No. Meetings adjourned.
Well done.